Hey everybody, and welcome to a special video that I'm pulling together to just show what has happened over the year from the beginning until now, starting with this time lapse. I've been trying to take this same photo every day to sort of see how the garden is progressing, and it's kind of rewarding for me to see that the garden is really progressing, and in this last month it's really taken off. But when we start looking back, early January, I'd spent some time putting in some garden beds and doing some sort of maintenance work, like creating some tabs and stuff that I'll be using later in the year. And I also, by late January, was planting seeds out. I was getting the early seeds going in the greenhouse and was very, very excited for the season at this point in time. I also spent some time putting some infrastructure in. I let things grow up, some fencing, and so I spent some time doing that. Late January, you see the things I started, and early February, you see the things I planted a little bit early are starting to come up. They're all in the greenhouse, they're doing great. I also spent some time pulling out and separating some of the seedlings. That's my process that I do there. And then by mid February, I had stuff in the ground, which looking back, I realized it was pretty early. I also had some garlic emerging, which was pretty cool. I put a lot of dirt on top of it and wasn't sure if it was going to survive, so that was nice. Mid February, you just kind of see all the stuff in the greenhouse taken off. That's my plan there that I use to sort of know where things are going to go in the garden I make one every year. And like I said, by late February, I'm out there putting stuff in the ground. This is me putting cabbage in the ground. Again, very, very excited. Again, in retrospect, I realized it was a bit early, even though it felt okay because the weather was doing okay. But this time of year, I'm mostly in the greenhouse. I'm seeding stuff up, getting these little seed trays going, and very early starting to get some of the early stuff out. So you see me there putting some of my cauliflower in the ground, and for any of you who have been following me know how my cauliflower has been a struggle bus this year. And I also put some peas in the ground, which I consider to be some early plantings that you can put in the ground by March. When I started looking back over what was happening, my lettuce, it was in the ground, my spinach, my kale, those kind of things, my cabbages, they looked pretty good early March. There was nothing wrong with them. I thought they would take off and do fine, even though it was relatively cool. But I, kind of looking down that row here, thinking, yeah, that's going to be fine. But they did end up struggling. And again, as I continue into March, I just got a bunch of stuff starting in the greenhouse, and all my little seedlings did well. I had a lot of good success germinating. But I did start running into I was looking at my schedule there, like certain varieties did not do well. Certain varieties were eaten down by bugs, and other varieties weren't. You saw some cabbages there some were doing okay, some weren't. So I started doing these sort of zoom ins. I was very excited to see some of the things doing okay, but I was stressed out that others weren't. My peas here, you see them taking off. My rhubarb is starting in mid or early March. And again, lots of time in the greenhouse just starting new seedlings. And what would end up happening, I only have a certain number of trays. I would start them and then I'd put them out and I'd start more, so those trays are always in use. But the garden looks pretty bare here in mid-March. There are things that are very small. When I look at it now, comparatively, I'm very excited. My peas were just starting. My little cauliflowers and broccolis and stuff are very small. My beets, we're just kind of getting going. But a struggle I had this year was potatoes, everybody. I think you guys know about this, but this is me digging them out. Super annoying. I kept running into potatoes from last year. And no matter how many I dug out, more kept coming up. So I did a pretty poor job of pulling them out last year. Late March, again, just kind of watching things grow. Certain things are growing, certain things are getting down. This is like where I think because I'm focused on it this year, I was really aware that things were and weren't doing well. I think every year in years past, I've just, I've really spent time looking in these things. But years past, I just kind of put stuff, it failed, I put another one in. But this year, because I've been doing these videos, was very aware that a lot didn't survive. Here's me digging out more potatoes in March. It just kept coming up. No matter how many I pulled out, they kept coming up. And again, spending more time in the greenhouse, getting all of my seedlings started. And yeah, always get them started in the greenhouse. That's kind of how I do everything here. And that's pretty much all I use my greenhouse for, is just to start stuff. As things were eaten down and not doing well, like my cauliflower and kale, I would start them again in the greenhouse, hoping that I would get a batch that would survive whatever was eating them down. I think I probably went through that 4 or 5 times. But here you see me planting out beets, and here you see me planting out some peas. The peas by late March, they're cold enough, it's warm enough, even though they're cold weather plants, that they'll do okay. And then I just continued to kind of keep an eye on the garden, and again, everything is little at the end of March, but it's in the ground and it's growing, which made me very happy. My fava beans took off like crazy. I don't know how excited I am about that, but because they're hard work, but they really did well. Tomatoes were doing well in the greenhouse, and April, I ended up planting out a bunch of beets. This is me putting beets in the ground. And again, very excited about it. We pickle most of the beets, but I grow just tons of beets. And this is me refilling in some of the lettuces and cabbages that had failed, that had been eaten down. And so I always had like the next round ready to go to kind of backfill them. A struggle I had this year as well was crows. Crows came and ate a bunch of the stuff on the ground. That was kind of annoying. But I ended up replanting the ones that were left behind. You can see here that, yeah, like I said, they got some perennials, some annual flowers ready to go in there. And by April, the peas are coming up. My beets are getting a little bit bigger, even though they had been attacked by crows. I put them back in the ground. My onions kind of struggled this year. They're still struggling. They never really took off. Broccoli never really took off. Cauliflower never really took off. But fava beans definitely did. By early April, I've got a bunch of my summer plants already started in the greenhouse, which I'm pretty excited about. I get excited about those. My lettuces are finally getting big enough where I can kind of see them and kind of think that I might be able to eat them soon. I eat a ton of lettuce, but again, struggle with little bugs eating down my plants and knocking them into the ground. And again, I think it's really because I focused in on really watching things this year. And you can see as I just kind of pan over these rows how they look like dirt at this point in time. And there are little plants in there, but it's just kind of funny when I pan over now how they've really filled in. Still pulling potatoes out mid-April. And again, my fava beans are kind of getting a little bigger, and my peas are getting bigger at this point in time. Um, my rhubarb came in, which was great, and my potatoes. I planted a bunch of potatoes, including a local variety called Ozette, and they're all growing and doing well. Tons of stuff in the greenhouse, as you can see. April. Most of this is my summer stuff, like the squashes and flowers and tomatoes and those sort of things. Cucumbers, I get them all going in the greenhouse. I don't direct sow anything. So everything gets a little start in the greenhouse before it goes out into the soil. But I don't grow them very big in the greenhouse before I put them in the soil. I start them and I make sure they're germinated, but then they go into the soil pretty small. I have a hops plant here that kind of grows out of control, so I spent some time cutting that back. And could you believe that I'm still pulling out more potatoes late April? I mean, they just kept coming up. I'd like to say it's comical and it's funny to look back at it now, but oh my gosh, it was annoying at the time. I continue to kind of restock things, beets and lettuces and cabbages. I just kind of keep putting them in the ground and keep filling in where there are holes throughout April. Oh, I'm so close to harvesting lettuce at this point in time, which gets me pretty excited. I mean, I know they're pretty small. There's some spinach coming up too. But lettuce is kind of like my first indicator that my garden has been a success. My peas are doing well. My raspberries are coming up, and again, and that's my broccoli. I mean, there were 5 or 6 broccoli there, and now I'm kind of down to one, barely hanging on. By late April, I got all my tomatoes and cucumbers. They're getting bigger. They're getting ready to go in the ground. I usually put them in the ground early May, although people out here in the Pacific Northwest would say that not to put them in until after mid-May or even the end of May because they can't handle the ground. But I do it, and they seem to be okay. I was harvesting mint. I was harvesting rhubarb by late April, which was very exciting, and oregano as well. And here again, I focused in on this because I continued to struggle. And again, I really believe it's because I was looking at it. This makes me laugh. I got some varieties of plants I'd never planted before. These are cabbages. And look at this spindly little nothing this turned into. So clearly it didn't do well. I will never grow it again. But it was funny to see that that was what I got after planting it. Again, now if you're looking at these rows as I pan across them, you see that you can kind of start to see things growing in them. It feels a little more like it's a garden, not just a bed of dirt, which kind of makes me excited. I'm out there watering at this point in time. I hadn't really watered much until then because it had been cool and rainy enough, but you start to see everything starting to fill in. Also in my garden, I have lilies and other flowers as well. I use them as cut flowers in the garden, so you'll see them popping up as well. And again, cauliflower and broccoli kind of struggling. But here, late April, a lot of my cucumbers and tomatoes and squash are getting big enough that I'm about ready to put them in the ground, which really, for me, sets off the summer season. And by May, I'm finally harvesting lettuce, and I harvest lettuce by going around the edges and letting the middle parts grow. And oh my gosh, by the time I'm harvesting lettuces, I'm in such a good mood. Now, I know they look small, and some of the lettuce heads themselves struggled, but to be able to start harvesting is great. I also have to harden off a bunch of my squashes and get them ready to go in the ground. So you saw them there up against the greenhouse. And here's me putting in more cauliflower because, shocker, the cauliflower was getting eaten down and not doing well. I also struggled with beans and cucumbers being eaten down once I put them in the ground. And so I asked for some feedback on that and got some later. But again, here's me harvesting lettuce. And here's just a slow pan of the garden in May. And again, it looks, some things look okay, but it looks pretty empty until you get up close and personal. I did a project in early May or mid-May, I guess, where I decided to take over half or more than half of our chicken coop. We don't have that many chickens anymore, and this chicken run. And the chicken run, they never really use. They're just free range or out in the field. So I decided to go in there. I'm going to make a perennial garden, so which will include some maybe thornless blackberries and maybe blueberries and other things. So I spent some time doing that, covering it in plastic, and I'm going to let it just kind of sit until the fall. This is me putting in my tomatoes by mid-May. Again, I think it's okay, but we had a really cool start to the summer. There's some beans going in the ground as well. And even though we had a cool start to the summer, that was me putting in zucchini, I thought it was going to be okay, but my tomatoes were not happy. In the greenhouse, I was starting late things like basil and those sort of things. And now you kind of see, okay, looking at my onions now, they were really, again, slow to take off. But sunflowers went in the ground and my garlic. And here's, again, as I pan, those are my cucumbers are doing okay, starting to take off a little bit. And here's my beets. They're taking off even though they've been attacked by crows. And so things are starting to feel like they're coming in, which makes me happy at this point in time. I also grew carrots for the first time. I haven't grown them in a long time, and I had just panned over them. They were hard to see because, again, it looks kind of like dirt. But I didn't realize you had to really get them germinating under wet soil to really have them pop. And I figured that trick out this year, and so I got a lot to germinate. Here's me putting some pole beans on my bean structure. And again, almost immediately, my cucumbers and my beans were eaten down by friends suggested cutworm, so I put diatomaceous earth. I think you'll see it in a little bit. Hear me spraying some around there, trying to protect them. I don't use any herbicides or pesticides or anything. I know I will be sharing. I always germinate more plants than I'm going to need to put in the ground. But boy, is it frustrating when you've germinated these in the greenhouse, put them in, and they get eaten down. But mid-May, things are looking good. I'm pretty excited about the garden. Things are growing in. They're looking good. My lettuces, again, it looks like a lot of lettuce. You might be looking going, my gosh, that's a ton of lettuce. But we eat a ton of lettuce because we pretty much are vegetarian at home. So we have a ton of salads and stuff. My spinaches are coming in at this point in time. My teeny tiny kale, they really struggled to get going. I've planted them 3 or 4 times, but today they're doing okay. Again, looking at just my garden, those are my onions. Struggle bus to come in. Those are one of the things that, again, I'm watching it and they're struggling. I'm not really sure. My beets took off. Super excited about that. We pickle and eat a ton of beets. And, I put all my cucumbers in and I was worried they were all going to get eaten down because of some that did by the bugs, but they didn't. My tomatoes, they got pretty shocked. My zucchini there, they were okay when I put them in, but my tomatoes got pretty shocked, but they have since recovered. It was a bit cool. Those are my carrots that are coming in. They're hard to see, but I managed to keep them wet enough to get them to germinate. And so by mid-May, they were all coming up. And again, here's kind of a look at just the garden. My beans, I had put squash in the ground, which I'm excited about as well. Those are just intended to cover some plastic. And these squash are over out on my septic mound because last year I did a bunch of squash, and here's some extra squash on the septic mound. And that's a mole that was playing in my garden. It was super annoying. But here's me out of my septic mound putting some squash out there. Last year I had done this and just kind of let them go. I'm doing it again this year. It's not to eat in the house. It's actually just to feed to the animals and use as decoration. So I'm excited to see if they just kind of take off and produce a ton out there, kind of free watering. But here's me harvesting oregano. I think that was oregano. Here's me putting diatomaceous earth around the base of my beans because, again, they kept eating down. I don't know if it helped or not, but I also didn't have much more eating down, so I guess it had to have helped. I also planted grapes this year. I got some grape starts and I rooted them and they started leafing out. So I'm hoping grapes will take over and cover that chicken run and kind of give them some shade. But here's just a nice slow pan of the garden. By late May, it feels to me like a garden, like enough is coming in. This row we're looking at now is the cauliflower row, and it should be fully full, but cauliflower this year and we're just not doing well. And my cat is hysterical. She always likes to come in and make a guest appearance. Late May, I don't have much going on, just a few things that that I consider to be summer plants. But yeah, harvesting lettuces, they're big now. I'm harvesting peas, which again make me really excited because those go in my salads. Garlic, the scapes for the hardneck started coming up. And I'm planting out corn at this point in time. They're really little. You can see me putting it in there. It's just a little tiny nub out of the ground. But that's, again, I just kind of get them germinated and then get them in the ground because I don't direct sow anything. Here's me adding more cucumber to the mix because some had died back. And again, as we just go through the month and start panning, June 2nd, things look great. Onions, again, still a struggle bus to get going. My beets are just going to town. And my tomatoes have started to like realize, okay, I'm not gonna die. I think I'll survive. I was a little shocked, but I'll be okay. And here we're looking at my cilantro. My cilantro always bolts, and that's my squash in the background. I don't understand why I grow cilantro because it always bolts. But the last thing I get in the ground and get started is basil, which in June I've got germinating in there. And then out here I'm harvesting mint, and I dry this out and I make tea out of it. And I didn't, kind of in some of these videos I showed like me actually harvesting and prepping the food. Like I took the scapes and made a paste out of them, a garlic paste that I used. I used the mint for tea. I harvested the cilantro even though I had bolted. And by early June, I'm harvesting the beets. The beets look great. So I do 2 or 3 rounds of beets a year. So I got really excited. So I was harvesting all of them down and they immediately went in and got pickled. And then I started some more beets because I had harvested them. I wasn't, I think, prepared to harvest them, but I want to have a second round going and I hadn't got it started yet. I also pulled out all my garlic, and where my garlic was, I planted all of my basil and my peppers. So I'm excited to see them growing as well because I make a ton of pesto out of my basil. And here again, just as a pan of the yard. My peas went to town this year. They're super tall. They're like taller than I am, which I think is pretty cool. Squash is doing well. Beans are doing well. And everything's starting to come in. Some are a little slower than others. I actually, by mid-June, I'm picking out strawberries. I don't know if that's early or late in the season because I don't really pay attention, but I am excited about strawberries. Although I don't eat a ton of them fresh, I do love the flavor of strawberries and put them in the ground, or sorry, put them in the freezer and I make jams and that kind of stuff out of them. I love the flavor of them. I love syrups and that kind of stuff. Here's just a pan of the garden with things kind of growing in and doing well. This is a close-up on my basil. A lot of it is a purple basil, so it's harder to see on the dirt. My zucchini is finally coming in. It's flowering, and actually, as of today, I've got a couple zucchini fruit on there, which I will harvest. My tomatoes are starting to grow. My beans are starting to grow and get little teeny tiny pods on them by mid-June, which is very exciting. My fava beans are getting ready to harvest. My peas are in harvest. My corn's coming up. So this is the time of year where early in the year I was a bit thinking nothing is going to make it. And now I'm like, yeah, things are going to make it. So by mid-June, my beets have started coming up and they're going to go in the ground to replace all the beets I just pulled out. One of the reasons and motivators for my perennial garden is my strawberries. They're just kind of a ground cover up against the house right there, and they're difficult to pick. So I'm excited to get them to make them more accessible. And my potatoes, they started to die back to me, which is a sign that they're ready to go. So I started harvesting some potatoes, but I typically just leave the rest of them in the ground. I started harvesting my spinach and I froze all that down. My cucumbers are getting big enough to start training up the trellises. My squash on the septic mound are growing in and starting to flower, which makes me hopeful that I'll get some fruit. I've got some fruit in the trees, which are also doing well. I've got grapes and plums and cherries and all those things. So I was checking in on them because I also, they're in the yard, but I harvested them and keep them, or harvest them, and I can consider them as part of the garden as well. But here by the end of June, like my potatoes are going crazy. Beans, again, some of the pole beans are starting to grow up. The bush beans, they're getting little things on them. They're not doing universally as great as I would want them to. That was my cauliflower, the few that have survived, and here's another set of them I've just planted trying to get them in. The zucchini is growing, and anyone who's from this area knows that it's kind of a joke that, if you're a gardener and you have a zucchini, like all your friends hate you and avoid you when they see you coming to hand off the zucchini. But here's my peppers and my basil, and again, things are they're slow. When I first plant them in the ground, they're a bit slow to get going, which I expect, but they do start taking off. And my onions have finally gotten big enough where they actually feel like they're growing in. My lettuces have gone so far that they bolted. This is my kale, my little tiny kale. I finally got it to start growing, and this is where my spinach was, which is now bolted, and my cabbage has finally come in, so I started harvesting this in late June, which is very exciting. And like I said earlier, my peas are taller than I am. And my corn is growing in nicely. And I'm just finishing up drying out my garlic and getting my beets into the ground. Um, and yeah, you see me here harvesting the last of my beets. I had a moment of realizing that I wasn't going to use those as seed beets, so I pulled them out. And you see me here harvesting the cabbage as well, and some of it going to my animals. And so my salads right now are great because I've got some carrots coming in, some peas, some beets, some garlic, some lettuce, and it really just is a really great time in the garden. Everything's growing in, doing really well. I think it took a while to warm up. I think that was a key component of it. And once the ground finally did warm up out here, being in the Pacific Northwest, we had a cool winter and a cool spring, that things are really happy. So I think as I continue to reseed things as need be and watch things grow, they will continue to do well. But I thought I'd just leave you with how the garden looks today. And thanks for watching.